one thing I want to do before we get started is to acknowledge the board members of Great Lakes Biomimicry who have been with us forever, it seems like. So you heard from Doug Piakash. Ali Dijanwala was yesterday. He'll also be today. John Sankovic is on our board. And Veno Chaya, who will be coming up next very soon this morning. Tom Tyrrell, founder and co-chairman. There's Tom. Don Connectus. Kate Faust is online. Hello, Kate. And these guys are helping all of us to change the world. So we appreciate them and their leadership. Another good friend of Great Lakes Biomimicry and a longtime partner is, of course, the University of Akron and Peter Niewiarowski. So we're going to hear from Peter about his thoughts about sustainability and innovation. I didn't get to that, so come on up.
I titled this Innovation Sustainability Through Biomimicry, Guarantees or Opportunities, and I'm posing it mostly as a rhetorical statement. So I'm not going to attempt to answer it in a definitive way, but what I hope to do at the end is encourage you that all of us should reflect on it continuously as we do the work that we do and the work that a lot of you have been describing over the last day and a half. So as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about, I did what I usually do, which is I went down a rabbit hole. I don't know if any of you have ever done that. But what I learned over the last 10 years is if you think like a rabbit, then that's not a bad place to go, right? And actually, it's maybe a place you should spend some time and you can get done what you need to get done, right? There's a purpose for rabbits going into rabbit holes. So it's a change of the way of thinking about it. But this passed across my desk in relation to a class I'm teaching in vertebrate zoology. It's a paper that was published about a year ago in Nature Communications about a robot hand that is inspired by the nose of a star-nosed mole, which is pretty cool. And you can see from the graphic here, this graphic abstract, that the hand and the translation attempts to capture various aspects of what a star-nosed mole can do, which is smell things really well and distinguish things that it's touching with its nose, with these tentacles of the nose in underground burrows where there's no light. So visual systems are really kind of useless. And there's also a lot of research on the brain, the parts of the brain that are wired to the nose, and there's some study about how that works and how the integration works. And you can see in here they sort of captured that with artificial neural networks and sensory integration. And basically they've prototyped this hand to be able to distinguish things that it's touching and smelling in environments where other sensory modalities would be not so good. So like in rescue, that sort of thing. So here's the mole. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen these, but they're here, believe it or not. But they make burrows. They live underground. So maybe that's the rabbit hole thing. But they live underground, and as they're tunneling, they're not only making a place to live, but they're also foraging. So as they make these tunnels, they encounter invertebrates, soft invertebrates, hard invertebrates, sizes and shapes and smells, and they eat those things. So like here's a relative of this star-nosed mole in the same group that's eating a worm. Here's their geographic range. They're associated mostly with wet soils, and part of that is these crazy hands that they have, these forelimbs, are really good at digging in wet, sort of loose soils, but they also are sort of semi-aquatic. A lot of the members of the family are semi-aquatic. They'll actually forage underwater, and that's sort of the thing that captured my attention. But before I do tell you about that, here's a look at the organ that inspired these researchers to make this robotic hand. You can see that in each case, here's the star-nosed, but here's some other species that don't have these tentacles, but they have these bumps, and these bumps are the tops of these specialized glands called Eimer's, or organs called Eimer's organs, and they're basically free nerve endings that with slight deformation because of tactile, for coming into contact with things, slight deformation, the nerves fire, and then the combination of different organs in contact in different places with different things, the integration of that sensory information tells the mole something about what it's touching. So it's pretty interesting. You could see that the surface is covered. The star-nosed mole has like 25,000 of these little organs distributed across the 22 tentacles. So you might imagine that the density of how they're packed gives them a way to really finely distinguish things like texture and size and stuff like that. And then there's this brain mapping in the star-nosed mole. Here's the region of the cortex that's associated with the sensory reception and integration of the tentacles. They've actually mapped where the neurons fire, right, in the cortex. So these are the tentacles mapped 1 through 11 on each side. And in the star-nosed mole, stuff that's associated with whiskers and other species that don't have the star is taken up for the tentacles. So it's a pretty interesting study system. All this work was done by this guy, Ken Catania. And here's another view. Here's a relative. This is a water shrew, not in the same family, but still closely related. And the thing I wanted to suggest here or tell you about to finish this story so we can get out of the rabbit hole is when these guys are in the water, their olfactory system, which I haven't talked about tactile, their olfactory system is essentially useless because the olfactory system is built to detect molecules that are airborne. But they've figured out a way to fix that without sort of building any new hardware, but just kind of like a software or maybe a behavior change. They can still follow scent trails really well, and the way they do it is kind of crazy. So here's a picture of a star-nosed mole from the ventral surface. They blow out little bubbles from their nose, but they don't let them go, right? They hang on to the bubbles, so there's some control there that's pretty exquisite. They blow the bubble out, they touch an item, and when that air bubble touches that item, it picks up some of the chemosensory cues that are in that item, then they suck the bubble back in, and they smell it.
What?
So, I don't know, I think this is a good rabbit hole because it reminds me about innovation in biological systems and things that are surprising to us, and the number of sort of times this sort of thing happens across millions and millions of species. This is a water shrew that's smelling underwater. It's putting a couple bubbles down, tapping the substrate, and it's going to find a little treat over here in the right corner. What Catania did was demonstrate that it's not just smell, it's also touch, but if you block their ability to touch things, like you put a grid that allows a bubble to pass through but not a tentacle, that you get a different result. But if you allow both things to happen, a grid that allows tentacle and bubble or just bubble, they have very high accuracy in finding things. So it's really interesting work, and it reminds us about this idea of innovation in biological systems, and it helps us understand how this translation works, where it falls short, where there's opportunity to go much farther. Like, I don't know, those little bubble machines? Could the robot hand have a bubble machine so that in water environments that are unexpected, it can still do the olfaction? So there's lots of interesting work that could be done and farther that we could push on this. The other thing it reminds me about is that every time we look at biological systems, we find something that we didn't expect, and so often, I would say almost always, something that's useful. So this is the lotus ant story, and we now understand that this surface is self-cleaning because it's hydrophobic, because of features of roughness at a particular length scale that repel water and that clean the surface of debris. And we thought, wow, we now understand how things in the biological world keep themselves clean. Well, there's other ways, and when we went to go look for maybe other models for inspiration, we found, not we, the royal we, but other smarter people found the pitcher plants, which use a completely different way to sort of keep themselves debris-free. So that this surface is hydrophilic, and because it attracts water, it has a watery film, So these ants are actually stepping on water, which is why they're slipping into the bottom of the pitcher plant where they're going to get digested and eaten by the plant. It's a nice flip of who's in charge. And so, again, these are reminders of the innovation capacity of biological systems that probably well exceeds our imagination, just because of the length of time that evolutionary process has done something like some star-nosed moles figured out how to blow a bubble and control it and use it to actually smell stuff, but just the numbers of species that are in different kinds of environments. So it's a really huge set of opportunities. But it hasn't really been quantified in ways that satisfy a lot of people. But for me, this is an old paper. This is by Julian Vincent in 2006. This is maybe the best source for me over the years that helped me understand the potential and opportunity for innovation and sustainability. Now, the details of this is something you should read by going to the paper, but I'm just going to give you the upshot here. What Julian and his colleagues did is they mined a patent database, and then they looked at biological literature, and they mined studies from the biological literature, and then they categorized problems based on the size of the solution that solved the problem, and then also the type of solution that it fell into. So they had criteria to do this. You should read about it, and you can wrestle with it. But basically, if you look at these two spaces, the small problems are things maybe like what the Lotus is solving with the roughness at the nano and micro scale. So it's solving a problem at a very small length scale, and it's doing it with something like structure. Maybe moving things across the country, like in our technology, is solving problems at large length scales for supply chain or something like that, and we solve it by like energy, right? So if you compare these two plots, the things that are really obvious are that in engineered technical solutions, we rely a lot on energy at all length scales, right? We throw energy to make plastics, to do fertilizer. We use energy a lot. And biological systems, energy is very valuable, very expensive, and biological systems often turn to other options like structure, like in the lotus leaf, or substance. A change in an amino acid changes a protein's function or the way it folds and what it can do, that sort of thing. So for me, this has always been like a keystone about innovation and sustainability in biomimicry relative to other kinds of innovations. It seems very obvious to me that using biomimicry as a process will mine other ways of solving problems that we have no clue about otherwise. Now, biologists and engineers are not the only ones that have recognized this sort of thing. This is an old study by the Fermanian Business Economic Institute that made some projections. I don't know if they're holding up, but these are also some data that show an index that they created, which is based on numbers of publications in biomimicry, grants made in biomimicry, and patents granted in biomimicry, broadly defined. And you can see that this is a trend that has been on the increase since 2000 out into 2014. Of course, Carol mentioned another example of something that came across from Fortune magazine. It seems like every month or so it happens. They've made this statement: if you're not incorporating ideas from nature, you're leaving money on the table. So business has taken note, obviously. And this Fermanian index now has been extended in collaboration with the International Society of Bionic Engineering. This is a kind of a recent update, I think, through the end of 2020. And something to note here is that compared to global rise in biomimicry patents, or the index broadly, China is really accelerating, has been accelerating 10 times as fast as the global index. And you can see the distribution of where these bionic research falls now globally from the same study. You can find this at the society website. Again, in business, this guy, Gary Pisano, who's an innovation guru at Harvard Business School, has written a book about several books about innovation. A recent article about 2 years ago, it was titled, "What Can Evolution Teach Us About Innovation?" He's actually argued the meta case for biomimicry. That is, that our innovation systems writ large should be modeled on biological evolution. That put at the center creation of variation, and natural selection to test hypotheses about what that variation can do or what it's related to. So these are, again, proponents. I've seen a lot of people over the years. I think these engineering challenges were introduced in about 2008. These are the grand challenges from the National Academy of Engineers. I'm pretty sure we haven't solved these yet, but these are supposedly the problems for the 21st century that currently we don't have really good solutions for, any of them. And I've seen a lot of people argue that biomimicry probably is a very important tool to apply to thinking about these big problems. And many of you guys have talked about these problems, whether you're working on narrow applications or broad applications. And I think that's something we certainly can do more of collectively. Okay, so there's lots of opportunities. I'm arguing there's lots of potential. You guys all know that. I'm singing, preaching to the choir. The one thing that pops out for me too, though, in this sort of thinking is that biomimicry is this interdisciplinary enterprise. I've heard several people talk about both the challenges and the benefits of that. And I think the challenges are things that we must continue to not ignore. That is, because of bringing together folks that have very different training and come from very different disciplines, it's hard even to talk about how to what to get inspired about, what the inspiration means, and where it can lead. And so these opportunities are also counterbalanced by some opportunities we have to stay focused on. The National Science Foundation just recently, I think, has taken a step towards supporting the idea that we need to do more to address these kinds of challenges. Did you guys hear about the new directorate that was created about a year ago called TIP? It's the first new directorate at NSF in 30 years. It's about innovation and partnerships between academia and industry. It's got a couple of different focus areas. But one of the things that the NSF did is they funded a workshop in late fall of last year to ask leaders in biomimicry that they identified to help design a program solicitation to fund research on accelerating biomimicry innovations for the benefit of society. So that was held in October 2022, hosted at Harvard and run by Syracuse University. And the idea here is to accelerate biomimetic solutions to the benefit of society, to address large and small problems. But this is now square in the middle of NSF's radar in the form of programs in this new directorate. So that's a really good development. The workshop participants produced a report. One of the things they noticed is that the range of applications of biomimicry solutions, cuts across all kinds of sectors. You can find this. This is actually a table from a report by Terrapin Bright Green out of New York. But also that the mix of people in the workshops made it clear that, communication and building bridges of language, culture, and ideas across these different areas is required to get to the middle, which is where biomimicry and bio-inspired design exists. So the implications here are about things like training and education. And one of the things that the report noted as one of the findings is we really don't have a workforce that's capable of wrestling with some of these interdisciplinary issues involved in bio-inspired design, biomimicry. And that's a really important problem. And if we're going to accelerate anything, we have to build that foundation out, probably over a longer time scale. So, what's the problem-solving context of biology? We don't really teach biologists that in life sciences. I'm a biologist. I teach introductory biology. We don't really teach that to biologists except for the ones that want to become doctors. We teach them how to solve problems in human health. But otherwise, we don't really do too much about thinking about biology as a problem-solving context. Potential for addressing grand challenges and solutions to complex, wicked problems of the 21st century. So this is an invitation for our community to think about ways to expand the education work we're already doing to address this idea of acceleration. So one of the things that we did with a bunch of other partners, and you can see them on the right-hand side, is we proposed a platform called BioIdeas. This was Bob Full's idea, to create prototypes that could actually be shared across colleges and universities at different scales with different resources for different purposes. Everything from modules that could be dropped into introductory biology courses, but also higher level courses, all the way to courses and certificates and programs. We need to come together and share what's already been created, expand that, and get more of this into life science, engineering, design, and other curricula. And this is one way we propose to help address that. An important aspect here is we want to engage industry and ask them what kinds of things like this do they think they need and that they could really use to ramp up the way that they use or want to use biomimicry, bio-inspired design. So this is pending review. I hope I can report to you at some point in the future that we got some support to do this. So which brings me right back here, and I'm not sure what to say, because all I did was sort of give you some thoughts about innovation and sustainability, but I guess I'd emphasize what I started out with, which is that I think it's obvious, it should be obvious to most, that innovation and sustainability are at the core of biomimicry and bio-inspired design. Now, having said that, it's very easy to do some of the technical things that I described, like with the robot. And actually, I'm not assailing the robot, but it's very easy to do those things and not think at all about innovation and sustainability and still get a result. But I think if all of us reflect more on what is the nature of innovation and sustainability that's embedded in our process or the things that we choose to make or address, then we'll be able to expand our outcomes and our successes in both those arenas. So it doesn't come just by doing bio-inspired design. On the other hand, by doing bio-inspired design, you have a leg up, I think, in both those areas over alternative innovation methods that companies are interested in. Okay, so that was probably too long. Okay, but yeah, I'm done.